Hey everybody, it's your girl Coach Christal. Welcome once again to Wisdom Wednesday. If you are just joining us, this is a weekly live stream where I get to talk to people who inspire me, people who have taught me things, and people who are coming up to the cutting edge of what they're doing in their field. It's all about vision. It's all about building a life by design. And before we go any further, let me welcome you into the Steps and Stages community with our mantra that just says a lot of things happened before this, and I guarantee a lot of things are going to happen after this, but I promise to be here with you now. Please be here with me now. We believe not only that vision is important, but you have to be present in the life you're living to create a life by design. And as we welcome you into Wisdom Wednesday, we're going to ask you to be present not only with me, but with our guests so that you can tune in, track your takeaways, and position yourself for transformation. Tonight, we have an amazing guest. Ioanna is here with us, and we were just thinking about when we actually met, and it was in California at a entrepreneurship and innovation workshop. But what we're going to talk about tonight is really the future of work. We're going to talk about some generational understandings that might be a little different than we've talked about in the past. We're going to get into AI, and we're going to talk a little bit about soft, hard skills and how those all come together to build a vision of a life you love living. And I just got to say it up front before we move on. If you don't have your ticket to Vision Camp Virtual, you need to jump over to SS Vision Camp right now and get your ticket. This is the first time in history that I'm covering everyone's general admission ticket, so you have no excuse. You only have time to grow. So without further ado, let's bring on Ioanna.
Hi, I'll be here with you now.
Yes, I like it. I like it. Hey, listen, first of all, thank you for joining us, Ioanna. And what I also want to say is that I'm introducing you in the way that I know you, but please introduce yourself to our audience the way that you would like to be known.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. I also realized we're kind of matching, totally not on purpose.
Great minds.
Yes. So, hi everyone. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dextego. Dextego is an AI coach for soft skills development. We are basically helping HR and talent developers turn B players into A, mediocre performers into exceptional leaders by leveraging AI and community. I'm here today to discuss anything and everything about future of work with you, Christal.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. Now, let's talk about what we mean when we talk about A and B players. Because I mean, I've run several teams, right? I've built a couple companies. We're talking about startups. We're talking about all the ways that we bring people into the vision and ask them to grow with us. But how do we get them to go from bringing the skill they have to owning the talent that they really have and making it a part of the vision?
Yes, great question. So, in a nutshell, an A player is a high performer, what we call a superstar. This is the person you go in your team for everything. Like, no doubt, you know that person that will get it done.
Mm-hmm.
B players, although some people say it's a derogatory word, it's just that they're not as I guess, high performers as others in the team. And there is actually a big cost associated with hiring such a person in your team.
Yeah.
So although, the companies might say, oh, we don't have money now to get like the best talent out there, let's just get 2, 3 that can do what one person would do, and they think that the cost is better for them in the short term. In the long term, it turns out to be twice as expensive.
Yeah.
So, how to answer your second part of the question, like how can we turn these people to actualize their potential and become A players, is by honing their soft skills. And these skills are things that you recognize, but these are skills that you might not have a certificate or a degree on, like
Mm-hmm.
communication, like everything you do, public speaking, like negotiation, like conflict resolution. Whereas technical skills are the ones you usually get from your education, math, science, more specific and metric driven things.
So I just want to put this out there, right? Because Ioanna and I were talking about this before we jumped on. We're from two different generations, right? And so when we thought about going to business school of my generation, or we thought about going to, a trade school, there was a particular idea that once you did that, you became an expert at that thing, and you did that until you retired, right? So we've
Mhm.
come across many clients in our practice that get to the end of that expertise ladder, and instead of wanting to retire, they're really wanting to reinvent. And that's something that subsequent generations have done a lot faster and a lot quicker than, what am I, Gen X, something, right? I'm right. But when you talk about soft and hard skills, let's talk a little bit about how we see that play out over time, over age group, over demographic.
Mm. Absolutely. And I think you're spot on. Like this generation is really something we haven't seen before. People just post every day on TikTok a different persona, right? Today I'm
Yeah.
an expert on that, tomorrow on something else. And it's really because in the past, the technical skills were guaranteeing your career success, whereas today they just get you on the door. They
Yeah.
get you that internship, that first role. But to get up that ladder and really have impact, one needs transferable skills.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes we believe maybe just like leadership, like these skills, it's not only for the C level, it's not just for like the CEO, it's actually something that everyone within an organization needs
Yeah.
in order for the productivity of the whole group to be high, for positive results to occur.
Yeah.
So I always say, like, because there's so much research that suggests soft skills are connected to high performance, emotional intelligence connect to leadership. Like there's no doubt on paper that these are important. Sometimes though, you see that when people are looking for team members, they're not always um, testing these skills because they don't know how to. Like
Hmm.
usually you need to get to understand the person through plenty of experiences, through plenty of conversations and like crises to see how they act,
Yeah.
and what are these soft skills that they have. Whereas the technical ones are so easy to measure, that they tend to say, okay, now I'm in a need, I need to hire someone, let me get them on board. And then they turn out to find out that they are not that, for instance, adaptable. So
Yeah.
it's too late, because you've made that bad hire. Now you have to try to figure out how to help them develop these skills, or else you have to fire them. But I think now, today in Gen Z, people are acting on it, whereas in the past, maybe in other generations, they would say, okay, well, now we did that bad hire, we have to kind of deal with it,
Yeah.
right? So you carry along all this like kind of burden as a team. But today, I think the work environment doesn't allow it. They're like, either we perform or we don't. We have the
Right.
metrics to get to, so we're willing to make like the tough decisions of firing people. And you see what's happening also now with all the big layoffs as well. Like it's creating a big skills gap in the market.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I hear you. And so you brought up something earlier, right? Like we might think that the cheaper, less expensive hire is going to save us some money, but we're actually spending time. right? And so when we spend other resources aside from money, it's still a drain on the organization,
Oh yeah.
right? And so I think it's really synonymous with the things that we teach here at Steps and Stages, whereas like you can pick a plan that will give you short-term gratification, but if you don't have a big vision for where you're going, the trajectory is just going to keep bringing you up and down like a roller coaster. You're going to be wasting time and energy trying to get to something you haven't defined yet. When you're working with startups, Ioanna, how does that come into play, that balance of resource and vision?
Hmm. Yes, it's very challenging for many founders, and I think the key is sustainability mindset. Like that's something that either you kind of have in your life and then you translate it to work, or you don't. So when
Mhm.
you don't, it's really a shift of a lifestyle too. Because I always say the sustainability mindset is not being environmentally friendly. It's really about being thoughtful about the long-term impact, the long-term effect, and that's something you take into your relationships, like your friends, your family,
Yeah.
when you're thinking of, okay, am I doing the right thing now for sustainable relationship or for sustainable growth of my company?
Mhm.
So it goes down, I think, to the core values of the leadership,
Mm.
and it's really evident. Like it's so easy today again to make that quick hire. Like you just need to post on LinkedIn and you get a bunch of people to apply, and then it's just a competition of like salaries. But eventually, if you just find the cheaper one, you spend not only time in explaining, like you get to a point where you say, oh, I can just do it on my own at this point.
Yeah.
So you're not doing yourself a favor at
Yeah.
all. And imagine that on a bigger scale, like with tons of employees and like big international companies. It's just a loss, tremendous loss, like inefficiency at scale.
Yeah.
But it is hard to detect A players. It also requires another skill set, I think. And today, with the technology in place, I think we're able to do that much easier than before.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to hear more about the technology piece, but something you just said, makes me think a little bit about this double-edged sword where you have this amazing A player and they're doing everything that's in their job description, and then they're going over and beyond, and they
Mhm.
might feel a little bit like no one's noticing or it's not getting them up the ladder faster. How do you retain that type of talent when you're not ready as an organization or as a startup or as a company to cultivate that type of talent?
I love this question. You're talking about the talent curse. This is the curse of the A players. I had done that research with a professor, Professor Tariq, back at my master's, and I love it. It's just so challenging
Mm-hmm.
because you're right. Not only you have to maintain their motivation high, and I think most of the times an A player, is driven intrinsically, so they don't necessarily care about the salary so much, but what they care about is visibility, like recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy for a founder, let's say a CEO, to always go to that person and after a while taking them for granted. And that's where they lose. What the best thing that I've noticed is to treat them like an equal and make them understand how much you value them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
look, I couldn't do it without you.
Yeah.
These are some big responsibilities I'm giving you. I see you. I know you can do it. And now giving them also the opportunity to be a mentor. Like, how about you also coach XYZ? Like,
Mm-hmm.
keep them always on their toes because
Yeah.
if they get bored, they're going to be gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Such people are always, seeking to change the status quo, to always ask questions. So the moment you isolate them because they can do well just fine alone, you lose all the potential they have to give you.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to speak to this in a larger schematic, right? Because many people who are A players are the child in their family that didn't have the big problems, right? Like they weren't having any trouble in school. They were always doing their best. They were, and so that translates into this A player kind of mentality and their professionalism. But when people don't recognize people who are doing well or are curious about their growth, then they start to waver in the output.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
knowing how to say no. I mean, you talk about that as well, like
Yeah.
knowing your boundaries and just not taking in more because you can. Like that's not a valid reason. Like you have to actually be interested in it. It has to be aligned with what you're trying to do. So taking a step back and telling, to your supervisor, like, this is too much. That I could do it, but I rather focus on something else now, or just take some time off from this. And
Mhm.
there are ways to go around it, but it requires self-discipline, which is
Yeah,
also tough to acquire.
exactly. Well, I think it's also hard when you're entering a workforce, right? We were talking about this a few weeks back. I was doing a post about how the social emotional learning that's being taught in schools is now being um, really required in the
Mm,
workplace, right? In order to build teams of people who can share their strengths, people who can find their humanity, and people who can align with the vision of the organization. And I think that's part of the soft skills you're referring to, because curiosity is actually a soft skill, right? And I,
100%.
yeah. So I'm going to say curiosity lands on A player, right?
Yes, yes,
Following
yes,
directions, B player.
yes.
Right?
Spot on.
Yeah, right. So when we really separate these two out, it's a way that we cultivate from the beginning. How or when you're working with people in terms of getting them to become A players, what are some of the tools and tactics you use to help them level up?
Hmm. I think because of the intrinsic motivation component, they also have to genuinely want to do something. So no matter what you do, they have to find a connection either to the cause, maybe what the company is doing, like their product, their service, maybe if it's a non-for-profit, like who they're serving, who they're helping, or it can also be a person. I think A players become super loyal when they actually find someone that they think understands them, because by default they are only a few. So they are living their life amongst low performers.
Mm-hmm.
They always were the different one. And for them to be seen and actually valued by someone makes them super loyal. So I think when you find that right fit for them, like the right team or the right mentor, they can sign.
Yeah,
Now, they can also, what we said earlier, that can be maintained.
yeah.
But when it comes to school, also for the younger like students, I think it's connected to professors. There's a lot of stories where a professor, a teacher changed someone's life, and that's the same thing. It's like the hero effect, right? When you find that one person,
Yeah.
or others could be like their therapist, someone who takes them out of their misery, their
Mhm.
suffering on a day to day, they will
Yeah.
become very grateful and loyal to.
I mean, I think you're hitting on something that's really key, and it's about culture making, but it's also about people building, and it's about, really understanding that it's people building these organizations and these companies. And if we don't address the people, then the organization is never going to grow. And I think that's one of the things that we have to start recognizing in all facets of community or communal endeavors, right? Whether it be work, whether it be service, whether it be academia, whether it be your family, really understanding who people are and what it is they're trying to build individually before we ask them to buy in to something we want to build collectively.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When I start working with someone, I give them an Excel sheet that there's some questions like, how you like to be contacted, like some basic things for work, but also what are your hobbies. And I really spend time initially to understand them,
Mhm.
which creates an amazing environment. And that is the time when you're bonding and you're vulnerable with someone to create also expectations. Because
Yeah.
now they get to understand where these are coming from, versus like if I just hire someone and I go and tell them, look, you have to perform XYZ level or else you're fired. It's a total different story than saying, hey, I'm building this business, that's my passion, that's why I'm doing this, and I chose you to be part of my team, but just know I have high expectations. And like get them to understand really how you think and how you perceive things, I think can change the game.
Yeah.
Culture is everything, and especially today where people leave their jobs left and right for another opportunity.
Yeah.
I think a company that creates culture has a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah, yeah, that's real. That's real. Because, I think people, if they're not seen for what they're doing, or they don't have the intrinsic motivation like you're talking about, they actually can't tell the difference between an option and an opportunity. So they may be leaving one situation to go into an exact similar situation, right? Without knowing that they're just trading apples for oranges rather than climbing up the ladder or, getting the fuller picture.
That's an excellent point. That's
Yeah.
an excellent point. And it's also connected to rewards that don't have to be anything crazy. Like doing some very small things, like every week we will vote for like the most helpful employee. I don't know, just coming up with something. Like
Uh-huh.
just small things that give them also the opportunity to be voted or selected by other peers. So it's not just you and your boss, it's also how the entire group sees you, because that creates a sense of belonging, and that creates this family like vibe, the bond that is so important for someone to wake up and want to go to work,
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
go to class. Like same, if a student if there's a student that disrespects the professor doesn't even want to go teach to that class,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. No, this is good. And I want to because I know you're a self-proclaimed AI evangelist. So I want to think about with you, I just really want to hear this, how the belief in the belonging of culture making can be assisted by AI.
Yes, yes, yes. I really believe in the potential of AI to help us enhance emotional intelligence on a global scale. Like it's so powerful, and I mean, we hear all the negatives every time, and I never say AI alone will save us. It's always a combination of human, like community aspect, and AI.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that it can act as a matchmaker to build bridges and seriously like help people with the right interests, passions, and level of skills get matched
Uh-huh.
for mentorship, for games, for like career development, coaching. I think it's huge, and it would take. I mean, I don't think it's possible for one like HR and one like culture person in the organization to ever do, because people evolve all the time, but the AI can also evolve with them and catch those differences, those changes in interests and new hobbies, for instance, to continue matchmaking. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, number one problem I see always on social media, like people complaining for after they leave college, is how do I make friends? It's so hard to make friends.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That, just to give a realistic like life example, is because people evolve so differently after college, and they create all these different lifestyles that you can't just figure out by knowing where they work, for instance. Like there's not enough data that you have as a person to understand whether that's a good match or not. Same
Yeah.
for like dating, right? But when you have an app, for instance, that can see you every day and see how you evolve, that's definitely much more accurate. This
Yeah.
goes also for recruiting. An interviewer recruits someone, that's one data point. Now we're having an interview. How do I know how you are tomorrow or how you were
Mm,
yesterday? And
yeah.
that can affect your performance fully, right? Like you wake up sad, your tone is negative, then I can say if I'm biased, oh, I don't like that, they won't be a good fit for our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're the most enthusiastic person and something happened that day. So
Right.
I think we've been living in such a biased world, like
Mm-hmm.
with so many reasons, that an AI coach can be not only like your friend and give you guidance, but also an awakening. Like, hey, you're being rude. Hey, make sure you're using inclusive language. Hey, like
Mm.
when you're presenting, you're looking only at one person. Like all
Uh-huh.
the feedback that we can get can make us much better humans, much better leaders, and can leave a better world for the next generation to come. Because
Okay.
no one's going to tell you in your face unless it's someone who really doesn't care. Right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I get it. In our practice, we have a really clear mantra of tracking your takeaways. And you're saying that this technology could be the thing that tracks your takeaways each day to allow you to really see who you are, gain a deeper awareness, and make the shifts that you want to make.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's a mirror. It tells you what you're great at, what you can improve, and how to improve it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so Ioanna, how did you get into this? Like, I mean, tell us a little bit of your backstory and how
Mm.
you came to not only believe in this, to do the work you do, but like give us a little bit of the trajectory.
Yes, great. So looking back, I mean, very young, I always knew I wanted to do something with business. I did that program where we met. I did a
Mhm.
lot in terms of entrepreneurship, but I thought I was mostly interested in sustainability and like doing sustainable business, more of like a consultant. Like I
Okay.
created this club back in Greece. At my high school back then, going into companies, suggesting ways they can become more sustainable. That led me to sustainable fashion, and then I end up like deciding what to study at school, and I was kind of lost. Like I didn't know what I was interested anymore into for the long term. So went to a liberal arts school,
Hmm.
and I got a class in psychology, which I loved, and that was super eye-opening
Yeah.
because everything has to do with psychology at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And fast forward, then I did my master's in strategic management with a focus on talent development, which is
Okay.
where everything came together. Like talent development incorporates business, but also psychology. And
Hmm.
so I then went into HR, started working at a startup called Aptivio, helping them recruit internationally between France, New York, and Portugal. And that gave me another perspective on global human resources,
Yeah.
but also the challenge that this creates with talent development, and how now can we help all those young managers remotely to become better leaders and basically develop their soft skills. It attracted
Mm-hmm.
the cost because we couldn't afford like to get executive coaches, and
Ah.
uh, yeah, then I started looking online into different tools. Couldn't find something personalized enough, but also having the user empathy as a Gen Z myself, I wanted to find an app that I knew they would want to use every day. A sticky app that would make them smile rather than just clicking next, next, next on a long course. And I couldn't find it. So I decided to bring the team together and create Dextego, and here we are after 8 months now. We launched our beta 1st of June, so we're here mid of August now with huge success so far. I'm super grateful. There's a lot of interest, and I think it stems from being at the right timing live. Like there's
Yeah.
no better time than now to amplify and augment all the work like HR, talent development, coaches overall are doing.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, it's
That's
good because
the
no,
story in that.
yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, we know that there were probably a whole lot of things we missed in the story, but right, in terms of development of this new venture and being at the right time, but also solving a problem, right? Meeting a need, right? And I
Mm.
think that's the other part that we sometimes feel so responsible for the thing that we said we would do in meeting a need that we may not open ourselves up to other opportunities, right? So this is not the first thing you thought about, but it is the thing that is bringing your interest and talents into intersection. So I'm just thinking with you out loud here, Ioanna, because I'm thinking about this talent development coach. I'm thinking about AI. I'm thinking about people walking around with other little voices in the back of their mind, and now they might have this electronic thing tracking what they're becoming or being. Where do we find the synthesis so that the person really does start to take the augmentation as a building of their own awareness?
Yeah, I think it depends on the role, first of all, but I think that no matter how much you practice soft skills behind the screen, unless you test them in real life by talking to people, you won't know if you actually learned anything.
Yeah.
It's just such a different environment when like you practice your elevator pitch behind the screen versus going to a conference full of people and trying to pitch yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think firstly that like to actually have a result, you need to put what you're learning in action. That goes for everything.
Yeah.
But then if you're like a leader, for instance, in an organization, you can use all that to understand your people better. You can see now their metrics, how they're
Mm-hmm.
developing, what are their areas where they still need to improve, and create the right uh, in person training, for instance, or conversations one on one with them to help them improve those specific aspects.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say here is that a lot of times you have introverts or people with trauma that are not comfortable sharing to a human, like to even a therapist. They feel embarrassed, like they're not comfortable.
Mhm.
So talking to an unbiased, like AI coach, for instance, it's so therapeutic, even if you don't get necessarily the response you are expecting back. Just the fact that you say it,
Yeah.
right? And it's the first step to you now being able to go and say it to a person and feeling that connection with them.
Yeah.
So I think it has a tremendous potential to have impact at any field,
Mhm.
and really can touch any type of person, no matter your age. I think you can always improve soft skills. You can always become a more empathetic human,
Yeah.
and these are skills I think that can only take us forward as a community overall.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, coming out of COVID, really using a lot of the knowledge that we gained, or I would say, knowledge is sometimes hard because you have to practice to get knowledge. I'm going to say information, right? Because during the pandemic, we were also in an infodemic. And as we were getting all this information, people started to label themselves and judge themselves and like try to put themselves in a box that they could understand because it may have been the first time they'd been with themselves in a long time, right? And so I
Right.
think this building of empathy and this practice that you are illustrating is really a coming back to a humanity without the risk, right? Because I think a lot of people are afraid to practice with other people
Mm.
because there could be judgment, there could be risk, there could be consequence, right?
And the other thing, it allows you to create a space.
Mm,
How many times I've seen, like especially in crisis situations, people act out where they wish they had that practice before, because it's never comfortable when you act out. You feel terrible afterwards. You're like, oh, I
right.
wasn't myself, like, oh, and
Yeah.
you blame yourself. So a space where you can practice. So how Dextego works is with micro challenges, like scenario-based challenges based on your role and industry. If you have that opportunity, when the scenario is real, it's now something that happens at work, you're
Yeah.
much more prepared and you have done it twice. It's the same thing with athletes, right? They always say they practice in their head or they practice in the field and then they succeed. So
Exactly.
it's the same notion. And I think it's a powerful tool because sometimes those challenges in real life can be super tough and nothing prepares us.
No, it's true. It's true. The only thing that prepares you is the experience. So let me ask you one more question. What soft skill felt like it was the one that you needed to work on most as you were coming into being, a CEO, a found like what were you thinking about?
That's a great question. I think I'm learning all my soft skills every day.
Yeah.
They're endless. Um, it's a very good one. I think it's connected to emotional regulation. Like,
Okay.
like what I said, like I think that is something that I will always work on because I'm such an extrovert and such an expressive person. Sometimes, like I watch, movies, and you have like these people who are cold blooded, like they never react on anything.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, I wish I had that superpower. And then I'm like, oh no, I don't, because
Yeah.
that means that I would pile up everything inside. So
Mhm.
like it's just something I'm not able to do. I'm not capable to do at all. Like that's not me. But I think sometimes it's needed, especially because for some people that can be too much, right? Like and vice versa. Like if you're super extrovert and you have an introvert that doesn't talk,
Mhm.
you're like, oh, that's so boring. Like humans are so different that
So
you
different.
kind of like a balance of the two in order to interact successfully,
Yeah.
or else you see there's no communication. So in my case, I think where what I mean with that is that I'm also so empathetic that if I see someone struggling or needing help, I will always jump and I take all that in me. So then I need to have super strong emotional regulation to not let that affect me
Yeah.
and move on. especially because of my role, like talking to so many people during the day. It's hard
Yeah.
to navigate sometimes, but it's definitely a work in progress.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
What
and
about
because
you?
me, my soft skill, the soft skill that I'm working on, I think, it's interesting, Ioanna. I don't know if it's a soft skill that I'm working on, but I'm definitely thinking about how my gift is also, the part of me that hinders the growth of some of my organizations, right? Because you know me as an educator, you know me as a teacher, right? So when I hire people, I see potential and I think I can teach it into them, but it's collateral. It takes sometimes it takes too long and it's too expensive.
Oh yes, I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
So I mean, I think the soft skill that I'm missing is actually maybe something that sounds kind of harsh, but maybe being able to see a little bit more linearly rather than holistically in terms of hiring for specific roles.
Yeah, I'll be super real with you now
Yeah.
because this is a common thing people with that gift face, and
Yeah.
I've helped someone else recently understand that it's always how you see things. Like, of course, when you're in that moment, you want to help, but if you take a step back and say, well, I'm trying to do that, but at scale, it
Yes.
will feel okay to not put all that energy in this one person because you know the greater purpose is to do that for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's coming back to that like purpose, like your vision, and saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, I know that's my passion. Well, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. So I can't let that be an obstacle. If anything, I'll help this person in 1 year, in 2 years, through my big success." That's how I see it, at least,
Yeah.
and it's the same thing that can be translated to other issues like homelessness. Like right now, we could both be going outside and giving all our money to homeless on the street,
Yeah.
but we can also make a lot of more money by working hard in our businesses and then help X, like I don't know, 10x, 1000x homeless.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing.
Yeah. And I think that's the difference between, again, like having fulfilling a need, making a plan, and building a vision, right? Like the impact is much more felt, it's expansive. And I think you're exactly right about that, because if we focus on the one thing we can do right now, we miss the thing that we would really love to do in the future. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, sustainable mindset is for the long term.
Exactly.
As we
Exactly.
see with startups, is a marathon actually.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You gotta lace up your shoes and be ready to do everything all at once, all the time. Yeah. So we don't want to hold you too long. We got one more question, Ioanna. We ask the same question to all of our guests each season. Well, each season we find a new question. And tonight our question comes from a Don DeLillo quote that says that the family is the cradle of the world's misinformation. So we
Oh,
often talk to people here who are, accomplished and brilliant, but there is a certain level of unlearning that I know has to happen to get there, right? And so we're just thinking, what part of maybe your upbringing or your family or extended family was something that you had to unlearn, or that was information that you found out later through your life trajectory may not have been true.
wow, that's a deep question, Crystal. I have to think about that.
Okay.
Oh man, I think a lot of fun learning has happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the time with people who have, had great success, there is a lot of unlearning from our original, programming.
I mean, the easiest to think about is when it comes to risk taking.
Mm,
I think my mom, in particular, the way she raised us was always like, be safe and like, don't do anything crazy, like
yeah.
from small things, like to not do like ice skating, I don't know, like simple stuff.
Yeah.
But to a point that it had created, I think, a limiting belief for a while to me that
Yeah.
I just growing up, I guess, put behind me, like because she also has a lot of strength. So I know she believes in me, but it's like this motherly instinct, that
Yeah.
sometimes is overbearing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, And yeah, I think it's just understanding that without taking risks, you don't go anywhere. So just going straight and overcoming that with more experience. And I think, the number one question I always get is about self-confidence, like
Mhm.
especially women all the time ask how you're confident, what's the secret? And I'm like, there's no secret. You just gotta do things and achieve them. That's the only way you become truly confident in yourself. It's
Yeah.
not appearance, it's not what others say, like only you proving to yourself you can do it. So similarly with risk, if you take a risk once and it becomes a success, then you're willing to take it again and again and again.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good, Ioanna. Thank you so much. Part of this risk taking and this confidence is that here in our practice, we teach that integrity is great to have because it means you're keeping your agreements with others. But confidence is really built by keeping your agreements with yourself, right? And that self confidence comes from being like, oh, I trust me more than anyone else, right? Like
Mhm.
at the end of the day. I would be remiss not to ask you this final question because you have been in a room with me, you have been to some of our workshops. What would you say to people who may be on the fence about coming to Vision Camp Virtual on Saturday?
Oh, you have to do it. I mean, there's no other option. I think you need that energy in your life. I think your energy is contagious, and you're very, very wise. I'm sure you've lived many other lives in this world. You
Yeah.
carry a lot in you, and the fact that you are able to give that to someone else, I think it's an opportunity they can't miss. And lastly, I think that when you know your passion like you do, like you just live to serve others and to help them achieve their goals, it's so genuine that others see it. So they will enjoy it for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ioanna. I know that you've been in the room. I'm so proud of everything that you have accomplished. I saw someone in the chat refer to people as Dexters. Is that what we call ourselves?
Yes, this is our users.
Okay, right. Okay, so listen, if anything has struck a chord with you tonight and you want to become a Dexter and you understand how Ioanna and Dextego can help you get to the fullest awareness of who you are and what you want to achieve in the workplace in your life, then jump over and check her out. Also, if you haven't gotten your ticket to Vision Camp Virtual, I don't know why. I'm covering everyone's general admission ticket. All you have to do is click over to ssvisioncamp.com. I'll see you on Saturday, noon to 3 p.m. I promise you won't regret it. And if you've ever even thought about creating a life you love, you need to be in the room. Ioanna, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a distinct pleasure. I mean, maybe I should become a Dexter. I'm going to work on it. Listen, y'all, we'll
Yeah,
see you next week, and I hope I see you on Saturday. Have an amazing evening.
thank you. Bye.